Okay, welcome to today's conference, everyone. My name is Warren. I will be your host today. Today's conference is about one of my most requested subjects as an English teacher. Actually, we're going to talk about the usage of modal verbs. Okay. Now, this conference is only 30 minutes. There is a lot of information out there about modal verbs. So I'm just going to give everyone a snapshot of modal verbs today. Okay, we do have additional resources available on our e-learning platform. I share with you the materials on that as well. Okay. Today's conference will be completely in English. Okay, the level is suited for B1 to B2. If everyone could confirm their level just in the chat box in here, just in case I need to adapt. So if you can just type, B1, B2, A1, A2, whatever it might be. Okay. So let's get started, shall we? So today's topic, as I've said here, is we are going to work on modal verbs, understanding the usage of modal verbs. I'm going to introduce them to you, tell you what they are. We'll talk about the special features of modal verbs, sentence structure, like how we use modal verbs in sentences. And I'm going to also show you a bunch of examples as well of modal verbs being used in different contexts. All right. Yeah, so without further ado, let's begin. So, modal verbs. I'm sure some of you know this already, okay? They're basically a type of auxiliary verb or a helping verb. And what they do is they can help express the mood, I guess, of another verb. They are used for many purposes in English. You can use them to express things like possibility, prediction, speculation, deduction, necessity, giving advice, requesting things, many, many things we can use modal verbs for. Okay. The slightly complicated thing about modal verbs is sometimes we use the same modal verb, but for different purposes. In other words, they can have different meanings depending on the context. Okay. I will show you a few of these today. As I say, we do have a bunch of materials available on our e-learning platform, which I'll share with you at the end as well. So, in summary, modal verbs, a kind of auxiliary verb. They're used for many different purposes. Here are some examples here. Okay, most of these you will probably know already. So we have things like can, could, typically used to express things like ability and possibility. You can also use them for other things as well, as I'm sure you might know. We also have may and might, could be used to give permission and also express possibility of something. Shall and should, I get asked about these ones quite a lot. Maybe to convey a degree of obligation, especially with should, and to make suggestions as well, and to even give advice with should, especially as well. Shall is one of these modal verbs. It's becoming less and less used in the English language. We normally use it to offer and suggest something, but we'll see that later in the presentation today. Other ones we have here, will and would, could be used for to talk about the future and to make polite requests. The last one we can see on this page, must. What does must do? It basically signifies necessity or a strong obligation to do something. As I say, we're going to see many examples of these in context as well. Special features. Now, modal verbs are a type of auxiliary verb, as we've discussed, okay? This means that they do not conjugate with the subjects, okay? So, modal verbs do not have infinitives, okay? They do not have infinitives, meaning that we do not use to before a modal verb. Generally speaking, okay, we don't really add to after a modal verb, but we have some expressions where it's possible. For example, like I have to do something. I need to do something. But generally speaking, like would to, can to, must to, we don't say that, okay? So no infinitives with modal verbs. Next point, gerunds, okay? We do not add ing to modal verbs. Never. No exceptions to this rule. There's no mighting, there's no shooting. We don't have gerunds in this case. And the last one, you might be happy to hear this one, there are no participles to consider, okay? We don't add ed, there's no irregular forms here, okay? There's no willed, there's no canned either, okay? So no participles, no infinitives, and they do not have gerunds, okay? Meaning we do not conjugate modal verbs like this. As I mentioned before, they are used for many things: ability, obligation, permission, assumptions, probability, possibility, requests, and offers and advice. As I mentioned at the beginning as well, each modal verb can have more than one meaning, which depends on the context of that sentence or question. A very basic example that we have here, you can go now. I'm giving you permission to go now. Or ability. I can play the guitar. Meaning I have the skills here. I have the ability to play the guitar. Okay, so context is very important when using modal verbs, okay? If you were to make a mistake in the sentence, it could potentially change the meaning of the sentence as well. So make sure you understand the different meanings, the different usages of modal verbs. Structure. How do we form them in sentences? Let's take a look. So, in affirmative sentences, the structure is quite simple. We have subject, the modal verb, verb. Okay, the base form of the verb, I should say as well. Okay. It should also be noted, we do not add s to the third person. We don't do this with the modal, and then we don't do it with the verb that follows either. I can speak English. The previous point we saw, I can to speak English, does not exist. Okay, simply I can speak English. And then we see with the bottom two examples there, right? You know, there's no s after speak in both cases with the third person. He can speak Spanish. He can speak French. No s. I forgot to mention to everyone, for those who are new to the conference, if you do have any questions, any queries, or comments in general, please type them in the chat box and I will address them as soon as I can. Okay, I should have said that at the beginning. But yeah, any comments, questions about the language here, or anything I've said, type in the chat box and I will get to them. Okay. So, modal verbs in affirmatives. Okay. No S with third person. Key thing to remember. Let's take a look at some negatives. Okay. The structure is very similar. All we're doing is adding not. We add not after the modal verb and before the verb. For example, you must not walk on the grass. Now here, it's possible to contract, okay? You mustn't walk on the grass. This would be much more typical in conversation to contract, like so. He cannot speak Arabic. With the contraction, he can't speak Arabic. We should not be late. In other words, we shouldn't be late. So, with modal verbs and the negative using not, it's usually possible to contract. Okay, and as I'm sure most of you know, in English, we love a contraction. We use them all the time in conversations. So once again, negative sentence, subject, modal verb, not, verb, in the base form. Hope everyone's still with me. So here we have modal verbs in questions. Okay. So we can see the structure here. Modal verb, subject, and verb. Very typical in English. We don't usually have the question at, we don't usually have the subject at the beginning of a question. It's normally a verb, an auxiliary, question word or something, okay? So here we have modal verb, subject, verb, again in the base form. I have some examples here for you as well. May I help you? Can I have another piece of cake, please? Would you like to come with us? Will you go to Australia this summer, do you think? Bit of a longer one there. Okay. So we can see these modal verbs being used at the beginning. May, can, would, and will. Let's continue. I'm going to show you some examples now, okay? I have many examples. I'm also going to share with you some examples as I'm speaking as well, you know, of different contexts and language tips and things like this, okay? So yeah, just remember, any questions, let me know. The easy one, or the most commonly used one, I guess, can. Used for many things, many things, okay? And as we can see here, you can use it to express ability, permission, and offers, to offer something. Now, can is often connected to the present. We usually use this when we're talking about the present or using a present tense of some degree. We can see some examples here. Julie can swim. Used in permission. Can I come with you? And offers. Can I help you? You might say other things like, I can speak English, I can speak French. Permission. Can I go to, I don't know, can I go to the bathroom, for example? Okay, something simple like that. Offers, as it says here, can I help you? Or can I take your coat for you? Okay. The next one here, could. So, could is often connected to the past or future. All right, often connected to the past or future. Quite often we recognize could as being the past version of can. Not always does this work, but sometimes, yes. And yes, we can use could to talk about the future as well. So let's take a look at possibility here. That story could be true. Who knows? Charlie could swim when he was 4 years old. Could I use your phone, please? The last one there, requests. Okay. Could you tell me the way to the station, please? So many things here. We can see possibility, past ability, permission, and requests. Let's continue. May. Now, this is one I get asked about quite a lot. Why do we use may? So, the term is commonly used, okay, especially to be polite, okay, but it can also be used to express possibility as well. Now, as we can see here, an example of possibility. The president may come to our office if the meeting finishes before 5 p.m. It's a possibility. Whereas with permission, okay, may I borrow your dictionary? Now, you could quite easily say here, can I borrow your dictionary? You could also say, could I borrow your dictionary? Could and may, for some reason in English, we see these as more polite than can. Now, can, just to be clear, is still okay to say. It's not impolite, but may, we just see it as more polite. So may, to be polite, express possibility. Next one here. Might, used for possibilities that are not always extremely likely. Okay? For example, possibility here, we might get a bonus this year, but I'm not sure. We might get a bonus this year, but I'm not sure. Now, with this one here, okay, the second point here, the past form of may in reported speech. Now, I have to be clear on this. This is not a strict rule, okay? We can also use may in reported speech when we're talking about the past as well. It's more common for us to use might, okay? So, for example, the president said he might come. Like the example we saw on the previous page there, okay? The president may come to our office if the meeting finishes before 5 p.m. The president said he might come. Okay. Must. This one here simply means you are obliged to do something, or something is a necessity. It's like should, but stronger in regards to necessity. Okay. Obligation. Dogs must be kept on a lead. For example, in the workplace, you could also say, I must wear a uniform, or I must wear a suit. I must dress professionally at work. To use a negative, I mustn't smoke, or you mustn't smoke in the building. Logical deduction, okay? You must be tired after your long journey. So you are assuming the other person is tired after their long journey. Okay, so logical deduction here. Mustn't, okay? Now, mustn't, in this case, you heard me say with the example before with, you mustn't smoke in the building. Mustn't means something is prohibited. Okay, just to be clear with that, I didn't mention that in the previous slide, but yes, it means something is prohibited. You're not allowed to do it. Okay, you mustn't tell Alex, it's a surprise. You mustn't tell Alex, it's a surprise. Let's continue, shall we? And then should, okay, this one here, as I mentioned before, to give advice. Okay, this modal verb is perfect for that. It can also be used to express logical deduction as well. Okay, so for example, you should take an umbrella in case it rains. Or logical deduction here. I have revised, so I should be ready for the test. I hope all of you have said that for your TOEIC or your 360, okay, or your 360 exam. Okay. So this one here, okay, you may have heard this one before or you might not. So ought to, we pronounce this, okay? It's not super common to use this in English nowadays. It's more common in maybe American English. They have like a more slang version of this where they might say oughta, okay, which you may have heard in films, or if you have an American teacher, for example, okay. It's pretty much a synonym for should, except it's a little bit softer. Okay. Used to give advice, so you ought to write to your grandmother, or you ought to send her a message. And logical deduction as well. 30 euros ought to be enough for the taxi. Now, you can quite easily use should here. I would personally, I don't really use ought to. I am from the UK. It's not that common anymore, but you may hear it on occasion. Will, to talk about the future, okay? So future tense auxiliary, I'm sure we all know this one. The ticket will be sent by email. Invitations and offers. Will you join us for coffee? Or won't you come in? It's very British. That's okay. So I did tell you there's going to be many examples today. So with shall, as well, okay? So shall we use to offer and to suggest, okay? You can use it to talk about the future in some context, but it's honestly speaking, we don't really do this anymore in English, okay? The way we tend to use shall nowadays is to, offer something or to suggest something. Shall I order a taxi? Or shall we begin the meeting now? Okay. This one here, would. Would, typically used in conditional statements. For example, the second conditional, if I had more time, I would go to the gym. Polite requests and offers. Would you like some coffee? And the last one there, expressing a preference. For example, she would prefer a window seat on the airplane or in the train, perhaps, or even the bus, I guess, any form of public transport, right? Okay, so I did tell you there's going to be a lot of examples of modal verbs in today's lesson. There's today's conference, rather. Quite difficult to condense everything to 30 minutes. So we have some e-learning modules available. As you can see here, they range from A1 level to A2. You can take a look at them, try the exercises, let us know how you get on with them. We also have some articles available on our blog as well, and we also have a YouTube video too. Okay. So I just want to say a big thank you to everyone for coming today. Okay. It means a lot that you're all here, and yeah, it's an absolute pleasure speaking with you. I will take some questions just now. So let's see the chat box. Give me just 1 second. So we'll start with. Okay, so we'll start with John Celine here. May I ask you to clarify the difference between it might, it would, it must be difficult to learn English by oneself? Okay, it's a big question, John Celine, but yes, I can answer this. Okay, so in this case here, so might expresses possibility in this case. Okay, it might be difficult. Okay, it's not 100% sure, and it's not, 0%, somewhere in the middle. Okay. If we were to say it would be difficult, what you're doing here is you're expressing certainty. Okay. You, as the individual, are certain that it would be difficult to learn English by oneself. Okay. And with must be difficult, again, you're expressing the certainty, but the certainty comes from your own ideology or your own thoughts in this case. So it's you, the individual, you truly believe, or you're assuming here that it must be difficult to learn English by oneself. Okay. I can see with would and must be, it's quite close, but would implies a higher degree of certainty in general, but must be, the certainty comes from the individual who says it. Does that answer the question, John Celine? I hope that was clear for everyone there. I'll wait for you to comment. I'll just see if there's any other questions here. So we can see one from Laurence. Would you go to the swimming pool or go to a swimming pool? Yes, so you're asking someone here, if you were to ask this question, it does make sense. What it basically implies is, if you had the choice, would you go to a swimming pool? Is it something you would do? For me personally, I love to swim, so yes, I would go to a swimming pool in general. And yes, Jocelyn, to answer your comment there, yes. I realize it's quite close in context. Okay. So yeah, just remember, might, not 100% sure. Okay. It's a possibility. Would, general certainty. Must be, the certainty comes from the individual's thoughts. It's what they are presuming. They are sure. So I think that's all we've got time for today. So everyone, thank you so much for coming today. Once again, much appreciated. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will hopefully see you all very soon. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.